Welcome to Sunday service this April 25th, 2021 at the First Unitarian Universalist Society of Burlington, Vermont, where we are at peak daffodil season. I'm Judy Brook, a member of the Worship Associate team. We are a liberal religious community guided by shared values including love, compassion, service, justice, and truth. We believe strongly in individual freedom of belief and encourage our members to pursue their own spiritual journeys and develop a set of beliefs that's meaningful to each of them. We are an inclusive congregation, welcoming all people of whatever class, age, ethnicity, gender, ability, or sexual orientation into our beloved community. You would fit right in. Thank you for joining us today. We acknowledge that our meeting house in the heart of Burlington and our homes, schools, and places of work are built on the traditional and unceded lands of the Western Abenaki people. We honor, recognize, and respect the Abenaki as the traditional stewards of landscape and strive to respect and protect this land while continually honoring the legacy of Vermont's indigenous people. Because of the pandemic, our meeting house remains closed to gatherings, but we are a very active congregation. Please visit our website at uusociety.org to discover activities, classes, discussions, and activities for adults and children. If you're watching this on Sunday morning, please join us after the service for the coffee hour that starts at 10:45 a.m. Just click on the link under events on our website. Grateful thanks to all who made this service possible in front of and behind the cameras. Special thanks to Melinda Lee, Margo Whitcomb, Sam Whitesell, pianist, James Stewart, director of music, Michael Wright, video production, and George Boland, videographer. No matter who you are, where you come from, what you believe, you are welcome here. Come, let us worship together.
Please recite these chalice kindling words with me. We kindle this chalice flame to remind us ourselves of the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment.
The call to worship this morning is a quote from Bayo Akomolafe. He is a West Nigerian international speaker, post-humanist thinker, poet, teacher, and public intellectual. Listen. Notice the sacredness of where you are, the mysteriousness of where you are. This is a different notion of indigeneity altogether. Not a provincialism, nativism, or exoticism that objectifies identity, but a living, breathing vocation of noticing the enchantment that is around us, in us, with us, wherever we are.
Good morning. Do you ever feel overwhelmed thinking about the climate crisis and how to actually do something about it, do the right thing? I know I do. It's easy to feel like we're all alone, or we don't know where to begin, or we can't make a difference, or we're too old or too young or too set in our ways. Well, today's story celebrates becoming imaginators. Imaginators are people who have the creativity and imagination to consider different ways of doing things, like the very young Greta Thunberg, who simply demanded that we all take responsibility and act on the damage done to the planet and the threat to our future. The author of this book said she wanted to write a book about being brave and how when you're on your own, it can be really scary to stand up and say something. But if we all stick together and work as a community and come together to support one another, it's not so difficult to make a change. Greta Thunberg lives in Sweden. The authors of the book are from the United Kingdom, and yet 3% of the book's sales are designated to go to 350.org, which is a Vermont-based organization just about 25 miles down the road. So you see, from Sweden to the UK to Vermont to the forests, we are all truly interconnected. Greta and the Giants, inspired by Greta Thunberg's Stand to Save the World, written by Zoë Tucker with illustrations by Zoe Persico, published by Francis Lincoln Children's Books. There once was a girl who lived at the heart of a beautiful forest. Her name was Greta. One morning, things weren't quite as they should be. Greta stepped out into her garden, and there, huddled together in the shadows of the trees, were all the animals of the forest. A soft, silvery brown wolf stepped forward with his tail low to the ground. "Please help us," he said. "The forest is broken and we don't know where to go. The giants are ruining our home." The giants had always been there, for as long as Greta could remember. But now they were worse than ever. They were huge, lumbering oafs, and they were always busy. They chopped down trees to build homes, and then they chopped down trees to build bigger homes. The houses grew into towns, and the towns grew into cities. They built factories and shops and cars and planes. They worked all day and all night until eventually there was hardly any forest left. The greedy giants had forgotten how wonderful the forest was. They didn't see the little birds and bugs and butterflies and bears that trembled in the shadows, and no one told them to stop because everyone was scared of them. Everyone except Greta. "Will you help us?" asked the wolf. Greta looked around her. The animals looked tired and sad. She had to help them, but how? Then she had an idea. The next morning, Greta went into the forest and waited for the giants to come. She stood alone, holding a big sign. The sign said, "Stop." She waited and waited. On the first day, the giants didn't see her and lumbered on by, and on the second and third day, too. But on the fourth day, something strange happened. A little boy who had been watching Greta made a sign and came and sat down next to her. He didn't say much, but Greta knew he felt as she did. Soon more people and animals saw what they were doing and joined in too. Before too long, a huge crowd filled the forest, stretching out to the city and the roads beyond. They stood together and waited. The crowd was so huge that the giants were stopped in their tracks. "Please stop," Greta cried. Your greedy behavior is spoiling our home. You've broken our trees and trampled our flowers, and now the bees and birds have flown away. These animals are homeless and our forest is dying. After Greta had spoken, everything was silent. But then everyone in the crowd began to shout, the smoke from your fires is choking the air, and please stop cutting down the trees, and you can help plant some new ones and mend my home. We need to take care of our forest and live together. Will you please try? The giants shuffled and fidgeted and stomped their feet on the ground. They were embarrassed and a little bit sad. The giants were so busy building that they didn't see what they were doing to the forest or the animals who lived there. The giants felt terrible. We're sorry, they said, and they promised to try harder. So from that day on, the greedy giants weren't so greedy. They slowed down and learned to sit quietly. They stopped working all the time and they took up new hobbies. They stopped chopping down trees and learned about gardening and living in the forest. They cooked, prepared, tidied, and shared. And before long, the forest became more beautiful than they could have ever imagined.
Let us take this time to deepen together into a time of meditation. We'll begin our meditation by sharing the joys and concerns of our community. Then we'll hold a brief time of silence. Let us take a deep breath together, breathing in the breath of life, breathing out the breath of peace, and come into the place of holy listening. Let us hear these words of joy and sorrow for Sunday, April 25th, 2021. Great sorrow for all communities, families, and individuals who are victims of the gun violence tearing apart our country. May we find a way to eliminate these weapons of mass destruction in the hands of society at large, and especially in the hands of troubled individuals and racist police. Sorrow for a rapidly warming planet and all its creatures. Joy for a fair trial in Minneapolis and a guilty verdict for the murderer of George Floyd. May the joys and sorrows of each be the joys and sorrows of all, reminding us of our shared humanity. As we enter the silence, let us hold that which has been spoken and that which remains unspoken tenderly in our hearts. Amen. Blessed be.
Our first hymn today is called Breaths. It's a song written and made famous by the group Sweet Honey in the Rock. The first line has always captured my imagination. Listen more often to things than to beings. Thinking this was based on American indigenous tradition, I did some research, and I found instead that it is based on a poem by Birago Diop. He was a poet, writer, diplomat, and veterinarian from Senegal who passed away in 1989. He worked in his earlier years for the French colonial government in West Africa, in the countries that are now known as Senegal, Mali, the Ivory Coast, and Burkina Faso. Throughout his civil service career, he collected and reworked Wolof folktales. The Wolof peoples are a West African ethnic group, mostly living in northwestern Senegal. The poem the song is based on was written in French, and the title is Souffle, translates as breaths or spirits.
Listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. To the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. To the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead are not under the earth. They are in the rustling trees. They are in the groaning woods. They are in the crying grass. They are in the moaning rocks. The dead are not under the earth. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. To the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. To the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast. They are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes. They are with us in this crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. To the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. To the ancestors' breath in the voice of the waters.
Hi, I'm Judy Brook. Welcome to my art studio. I've always been a lover of nature. My earliest memory is of a caterpillar on a tree, a big green caterpillar measuring its way up the trunk. My mother says we were on a way to get ice cream. My first ice cream, I don't remember that at all, but I do remember the caterpillar. I loved it. When we moved to Laramie, Wyoming, one evening my mother called to me and said, "Judy, come and look at this." And what she wanted to show me was an egg inside the chicken we were going to have for dinner. And there it was, ensconced in the bird. Oh, that was so amazing. As a teen, I spent a lot of time outdoors in nature. Oftentimes canoeing the Superior Quetico, which are the border waters in northern Minnesota, into Canada. And I would go there with friends, with our canoes, paddling. and leaving no trace in these massive forests and big waters, surrounded by pine trees and yodeling loons, and at night, the aurora borealis, or northern lights. Of course, I had to major in biology with this love, and one day I came into one of my biology classes with the news that my rat in psychology had just given birth to 13 babies. That was absolutely amazing. And my advisor turned to me and said, "You know what you are? You're an oh my biologist." Yes, that's who I am. I'm an oh my biologist, fascinated by life around me. Through my years of graduate education, I remained an oh my biologist, studying marine biology and ecology and doing research on sea urchins. Then I switched from being an environmental consultant to becoming an educator. I focused on engendering in my students a clear understanding of how things work, from atoms to ecosystems, and an awe for nature, from insects to human anatomy, fossil fish to bird migration. Because if you understand something, you feel awe for it, and then love, and you want to protect it, because all are part of that interconnected web of life. I've always been guided by the words of Mary Oliver, another oh my biologist. Mary Oliver says, "Look around. Be amazed. Tell about it. And I would add a fourth step. Take action. Be creative in that action. Take action in words or song, dance or art, music, and the action is to express gratitude, become an active steward, learn, change when you've learned something, teach, and support. For example, joining Audubon or Shelburne Farms, which educates for a sustainable future. Support those things you believe in with your labor and your creativity and your financial backing. To repeat myself, let me repeat what Mary Oliver said. Mary Oliver said, "Look around. Be amazed. Tell about it. Take action," I would add, with words and song, dance, art, music. Be creative. Express your outrage. Protest. Repair what's broken. Learn. Implement change. Teach. And support. For example, 350.org. Support with your money and your time and your creativity. Join me in being an oh my biologist.
Today's offering will be shared with 350 Vermont, whose mission is to organize, educate, and support people in Vermont to work together for climate justice, resisting fossil fuels, building momentum for alternatives, and transforming our communities towards justice and resilience. As a footnote to this, there will be a climate justice workshop this afternoon, April 25th, from 1 to 2 on Zoom. You can find the link on our website. With gratitude, we dedicate these gifts in the service of our mission to inspire spiritual growth, care for each other and our communities, seek truth, and act for justice.
Good morning. Before I share the reflection that I have for you today, I just wanted to share a little bit more context from the call to worship, which came from a piece called Dear White People. And he was responding, the quote I shared, he was responding to a question that he often gets, which is, how do I become Indigenous? And he responds at length, and I'll just give you the excerpts. He says, you are already Indigenous. He says to interrogate your whiteness. He says, saying sorry is not enough. And he says, listen, notice the sacredness of where you are. I titled this piece, Last Supper, Last Winter. One of my COVID-approved winter pleasures this year was ice skating, preferably skating on what I liked to call wild ice. I was always on the lookout for pockets of ice, which were often short-lived and serendipitous, especially as the days grew longer, bringing warmth and melting. Wild ice are large frozen puddles on the beach of Lake Champlain, or beaver ponds, or a sudden lockup of a bay on a particularly cold night, or a rain on snow event followed by a polar vortex. They are by nature a thrill, a gift, a fleeting opportunity. One early morning while I was skating on the beach puddles, I knew it was probably my last romp. The ice was still holding strong in the shadows, but surrendering to melt in the sunshine. Late March. Most everyone I knew was celebrating the blast of spring weather on the horizon, but my mood was bittersweet. On the purely corporal level, I would miss the meditative mini laps on my puddles. I'd miss the rocking, the swaying, the speed, the flight without wings, the dance with the wind. the fancy footwork to avoid the beach flotsam anchored in the ice. On a meta level, I notice that I feel this way each spring since I fixed my gaze on the climate crisis. Anticipatory grief, perhaps, knowing that at some future point, this turn of season will mark the last. Is this the last time? Will the ice return next year? How many more winters can we expect? And we likely won't know when it is the last time. The last time the lake freezes over. The last time we get over a foot of snow. The last time I hear the squeakiness of the snow underfoot in sub-zero temperatures. The last time my breath turns my hair into icicles. The last time somebody's kids get to celebrate an unexpected snow day. My last skate on wild ice corresponded with the season of Lent. Growing up as an atheist adjacent to many Catholics in my working class town, my narrow view of Lent was the season for giving up chocolate, bacon, or a certain TV show. Now I'm in a process of reclaiming a version of Christianity that has been marginalized for millennia. It's feminist. It's Jesus was a brown-skinned Jewish immigrant. It's experiential, radical, and ready to take on empire. Part of my reclamation is reconsidering the Christian traditions and rituals. I realize that Lent could also be a time to remember the lasts, as it corresponds to the period marking the end of Jesus' life in the flesh. The last 40 days is a whole series of lasts, conversations, experiences, connections, intimacies, even views of sunsets. And for the survived by group, like Mary Magdalene and the disciples, if the upcoming death is anticipated, the Lenten season is a time of heightened awareness. How tightly might we hold our beloved when we know embraces are going to be limited? How potent are the words that they speak in their last days or moments? What mysteries might be uncovered with our soon-to-be departed? I'm curious if the disciples knew that the Last Supper was, in fact, the Last Supper with their rabbi. And the act of communion, right, that comes from that Last Supper. What if we took communion as an act of remembering our last meal with a group of beloveds and recognized a Christ in all of them? This Lent, I gave up social media in an attempt to make more room for the divine. I wanted to heighten my awareness of my connection to God. I wanted to be out on the beach puddles a little more often, and it worked. My thoughts on Lent also come from thinking about the time before my mother's death. And in the years following her death, when approaching her death date, I would recall her last days and weeks. The last Mother's Day, the last time we took her to our camp in the woods, the last solstice. In those weeks before her deathversary, grief was often more present, as was a closer connection to her and also those memories. It was almost as if those grief emotions and bodily sensations became associated with early summer days. I didn't need to consciously recall the memories. Somehow my body had maintained a log of feelings and experiences. It has, for me, become a season unto itself. As Lent brings Christians to the high holy days and the miracle resurrection, June brings me to my mother's last day. I mark it with ritual, as we mark the high holy days with lots of ritual. And in return, I'm often graced with a sense of her spirit in the wild. And so I've come to appreciate lasts and maybe not cling to them, honoring them instead of hoarding them, slowing down to pay attention and anticipate them rather than living at a blinding, consumptive speed. The pandemic, of course, has provided ample opportunities to ponder many lasts. From the mundane lasts, like the last time I went to the office or the last time I had dinner out, to the more heartbreaking ones, like the last time I saw my friend, parent, or love, or maybe the last time I held my grandchild. Many of us have been forced to slow down, and we have had the space to recognize these lasts. Perhaps we've had enough time to pay them homage and feel their unique grief. Maybe more than enough time. Pandemic times have also meant many people are getting closer to nature. And in so doing, I wonder if they are also getting closer to the tragedy of a rapidly warming world. For those of us who have fixed our gaze at the climate crisis, anticipatory grief is an emotion we know and reckon with. Fellow organizers, fellow Easter people, fellow UUs, I believe we need to continue to resist, reform, restore, and rebuild all those doing things that we can do for all that we can still save. And alongside that labor for climate justice and for revolutionary love, I believe we also need to make ample time and space for grief and gratitude. And in so doing, remake a culture of sacred relationships to land, water, seasons, and our earthly and mystical cohabitants. On that last morning of skating, as I was about to leave the beach, I turned and gazed back, and I realized I had not given gratitude as I wanted to. I walked back to the edge of the frozen puddle, and I actually got down on my knees. I thanked, and I honored, and in the moment I was inspired to transfer a kiss from my fingers down to the ice. And as I brought my hand back, I realized it was covered in meltwater from the ice. And so I brought that and brushed my brow with it. I made that time worthy and sacred. If it happens to be my last time, it was worthy and it was sacred. Blessed be.
Do you hear, oh my friend, in the place where you stand, through the sky, through the land? Do you hear, in the heights on the plain, in the vale on the main, in the sun, in the rain? Do you hear, Through the roar, through the rush, through the throng, through the crush. Do you hear in the hush of your soul, of your soul? Hear the cry, fear won't still. Hear the heart's call to will. Hear a sigh startling shrill in your soul, in your soul. From the place where you stand to the outermost strand, do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear, do you hear? All the dreams, all the dares, all the sighs, all the prayers, they are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear, do you hear?
Please recite these chalice extinguishing words with me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. The benediction today is from the words of Gary Kowalski, our former minister. Go in peace, speak the truth, give thanks each day, respect the earth and its creatures, for they are alive like you. Care for your body, it is a wondrous gift. Live simply, be of service, be guided by your faith and not your fear. Go lightly on your path, walk in a sacred manner.